Welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin with the latest today as explosive drones have struck Ukraine's capital, damaging several apartment blocks. Early this morning, as families were preparing to start their week, waves of explosive drones struck Ukraine's capital. The blast echoed across Kyiv, setting buildings ablaze and sending people scurrying to shelters. At least 3 people were killed. Exactly how many drones were used in the attack on the capital was not immediately clear. Very shortly, we'll be speaking to VOA's correspondent, Anna Chernikova, live for us in Kyiv. But let's take you to another drone that hit the Every Marine Terminal in the southern Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv late last night. It caused storage tanks of sunflower oil to go up in flames. Video released by the state's emergency service of Ukraine showed firefighters tackling a large fire at the terminal. Andriy, a senior manager who declined to give his last name, said it took more than 5 hours to extinguish the blaze. He said it was the second attack on the storage facility located on the Bucha River since June. According to him, the terminal is Ukraine's largest such facility involved in exporting sunflower oil, of which the country is a major producer. The head of the Ukrainian president's staff said the latest attacks in Kyiv were carried out with so-called suicide drones. Let's take you to VOA's correspondent, Anna Chernikova, who joins me now from Kyiv. Anna, hope you are safe where you are. Thank you for joining us. Tell us, I mean, more strikes today, we understand. How bad is it?
Good evening. Well, I'm sorry, it's a little bit too dark already here, but still you can see just here, yes, behind. The rescue operation is still ongoing. Well, in terms of bad, I should say that today is a week since this last massive missile attack. Today we can say it was a mass drone attack, and particularly on Kyiv as well. Today in the morning, Kyiv citizens heard 5 explosions. One of the explosions, I'm sorry. One of the explosions hit the residential building, which is just at the back. You can see the light. It's the rescue operation, which is ongoing. In general, 28 drones were launched on Kyiv. This was confirmed by the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko. 5 of those reached the capital, so most of them were destroyed by the air defense. Here you can see the images from earlier today. One of the drones hit the residential building, 5-story residential building in the very city center. Unfortunately, we have confirmed 4 people killed, including a young couple who were expecting a baby. A woman was 6 months pregnant. This building is located very close, just on the opposite side, of the power plant, and apparently power plant was the main target. But again, Russian forces didn't, well, they missed. Also, this building is located very close to the building that was hit a week ago by the missile, and also apparently the main target was power plant. So according to what we know, all the attacks were targeting critical infrastructure mostly. What I can also tell that the attacks not only happened in Kyiv, attacks also happened in the west part of the country, in the north part of the country, and also in the south. In terms of the east, we know that Dnipropetrovsk region was very much damaged as well, and electricity problems are currently in that region. In terms of Kyiv, there is no electricity problem for the moment, but still, government is asking people to be very reasonable in using electricity and to make sure they can decrease the usage of electricity. What also is important is that these attacks were made by Russian forces with the use of Iranian drones. And unfortunately, these drones are quite difficult. Well, it was new, so it was the first time the drone was used in the capital, and unfortunately, something which is sometimes more difficult to destroy in the air. However, Ukrainian air defense demonstrated quite a good result. According to, again, to the official information that we know, in the past 24 hours, Ukrainian air defense destroyed 85% of drones.
And Anna, thanks for that update. And, you know, visuals we were watching earlier are visuals that you sent in earlier after the blast in some parts of Kyiv. But Anna, it seems that, you know, Kyiv is under attack. You talked about the west and north and also the south where this drone strikes happened. Are people moving out, you know, of Kyiv, these areas for their safety?
No, people are not moving out. I should say that people, well, at one side, people are getting used to this environment they are living in. Unfortunately, of course, but in terms of the attacks, I can say that Kyiv is living on, going. The life is going on. And it was no panic, to be honest. Of course, people are acting carefully, and they're trying to be as safe as possible to get to the shelters. Of course, air raid sirens are taken more seriously now than it was even a month ago. But people are not leaving, definitely not. Children are running around around the playgrounds. Cars are going around. So it was no, let's say, it was no. You know, a stop of life in Kyiv. Life is going on. Of course, those people who suffered and who lost their homes, they will have to move. For the moment, we know that those people who were living in the buildings that was destroyed today, they will get temporary home to stay, and maybe even a new home from the government. But this would be confirmed a bit later. But in general situation, well, people understand the risks, of course, but people remain in the city, and well, people just live through this.
And Anna, the government, what have they said with this barrage of attacks coming a second week?
Yes, well, actually, it was quite expected that Russian Federation will try to increase attacks on the critical infrastructure as winter is approaching. And we clearly see that the main target is actually critical infrastructure, and particularly electricity infrastructure, energy infrastructure. Today, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine was talking to his international colleagues, and he mentioned that these are not only attacks targeting Kyiv and Ukraine in general, but also these attacks are targeting the energy safety of Europe, because Ukraine was exporting electricity to Europe before these attacks started. So this is definitely what government expected and was talking about as well. But of course, we know also, we hear from the government that additional air defense would be supplied soon, and this air defense in particular should help fighting these drones and also missiles, of course. But drones are, for the moment, are used very, very often by Russian forces around Ukraine, particularly to target, to hit energy infrastructure.
Anna, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Do continue to stay safe. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, here's a look at more on the tragic morning in Kyiv.
Clumps of smoke rising in the sky after several explosions rocked Kyiv for the second time in a week. The head of the Ukrainian president's staff, Andriy Yermak, says the attacks were carried with a wave of Iranian-made kamikaze drones, killing at least one person. Teams of first responders are seen arriving shortly after the blasts, as local residents and members of the media seek refuge in a bomb shelter nearby. Shortly, emergency workers respond to a fire and damage to a building and rescue people trapped under the rubble. Some terrified residents emerge from underground shelters, describing the tragic incident.
We
were in the room when the blast started. We then go out and see the staircases gone, all gone to the ground floor. We waited for the alarm to be called off. We were lying on the floor. Firefighters came and they used the ladder to rescue us one by one. We then ran to the shelter in that building. It was horrible.
And then footage captures the moment Ukrainian police fired into the air, trying to shoot down Russian drones attacking Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. In the meantime, the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, says Russia is a terrorist country following drone strikes in the capital.
The target destroyed the whole infrastructure of Ukraine, destroyed the infrastructure of our hometown. They less people freezing in the winter, less people do it without electricity. The Russians want to make the humanitarian catastrophe in our hometown, and also at the same time destroy the buildings. It's not the first one, the apartment building in our hometown, where killed the people. We have more than 200 apartments building destroyed from Russians attack, where killed a lot of people, civilians, unguilty people. And that's why it's terror attack. And Russians is terror country. I'm more than sure. Do you see the unguilty people killed every day, not just in Kyiv, everywhere in Ukraine?
The attacks come exactly 1 week after Russia unleashed its heaviest aerial bombardment of Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities since the start of the war.
And European Union foreign ministers today are discussing the situation in Ukraine after Russian drones struck buildings near a central Kyiv railway station during a rush hour attack. Denmark's foreign minister Jeppe Kofod called on the EU to respond decisively to the attacks, which Kyiv said killed several people.
We saw this morning, again, Kyiv under a Russian attack. Therefore, it's very important that we respond decisively from the EU side. And from our side, for me, it's very important that we establish a EU military training mission to Ukraine, and also that we release more money for supplying Ukraine with weapons, and not least also weapon systems that can defend themselves against these attacks we see at the moment. Iranian drones are used apparently to attack in the middle of Kyiv. This is an atrocity we need to address. We see that Iran itself, the leadership in Iran, are cracking down on its own population in a way that is inhuman and against all norms and rules, and we should react strongly to that.
Il sera question aussi de la Chine qui se montre de plus en plus assertive, une assertivité, une montée en puissance qui, à nos yeux, doit s'accompagner d'une prise de responsabilité. La Chine doit quitter sa position ambiguë.
Staying with the arrivals at the EU, the bloc is seeking concrete evidence of any Iranian involvement in Russia's war in Ukraine. Ukraine has reported a spate of Russian attacks with Iranian-made Shahed 136 drones in recent weeks, but Iran denies supplying the drones to Russia, while the Kremlin has not commented. The bloc's top diplomat told reporters as he arrived for the meeting of EU foreign ministers that they are looking for that evidence, adding that Ukraine's Dmytro Kuleba would take part in the gathering.
Socioeconomic consequences of the war continues. These wars continue sending shockwaves around the world. Russia is more and more isolated, as we could see on the vote last day in the United Nations. Morally, politically, even militarily, Russia is losing this war. So we have to continue supporting Ukraine. And that's what the ministers will decide today. I hope it's going to be a 6 new tranche of the European Peace Facility, military support, and this training mission, a powerful training mission deployed out of the borders of Ukraine, but providing strong support to the Ukrainian military. This is something that will be discussed. This is something that will be discussed, and we will look for concrete evidence about the participation that Iran is strongly, in the strongest possible term, denied. Well, let's see which is the information. Kuleva will participate in the meeting, but the sanctions today are related with the repression against the demonstrators as consequences of the die of Mr. Mizrahi. This package of sanctions has been discussed and prepared, and I'm sure will be adopted. On the issue of drones, the discussion will continue.
Why is it so important?
This is a nice paper about China. It's a paper that takes the relationship with China in all its complexity. It is as much complex as it was when we said that it's a partner, competitor, and a rival. I think that we have to continue dealing with these 3 dimensions of our relationship with China. Thank you.
In the meantime, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani, just as Mr. Borrell spoke about, he told reporters during the weekly press conference that Iran had not provided weaponry to any side in the conflict. According to him, quote, unfortunately, news is published that stems from political goals and largely is developed upon by Western media. Just as it has countlessly announced, the Islamic Republic of Iran is not on any side of the war between Russia and Ukraine. The Islamic Republic of Iran has not exported any weapon to any side of the war. He said regarding the war in Ukraine, Iran opposes the war based on its own capacity and the good relations it has had with both sides of the conflict, said has made its attempts to end the military approach. Mr. Kanani also commented on the fire that broke out at Tehran's Evin prison over the weekend, blaming the U.S. and some European governments for taking a presumptive stance. For Russia's defense ministry, it has claimed the massive attack on military targets and energy infrastructure across Ukraine using high-precision weapons. In its daily briefing, the defense ministry said it had hit all designated targets in the latest bombardments of Ukrainian cities and also thwarted an attempt by Ukraine to breach its defenses in the southern Kherson region. Defense ministry spokesman General Igor Konashenkov also said Russian aircraft and artillery destroyed 6 Ukrainian ammunition depots in various locations, including one in Soledar in the Donetsk region. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that heavy fighting was going on around 2 towns in Ukraine's Donbass region, Soledar and Bakhmut. Russian still refers to Bakhmut as Artyomovsk. The town bore the name from 1924 to 2016 after a Russian Bolshevik revolutionary Artyom, otherwise called Fyodor Sergeyev, who was active in Donbass in the early part of the 20th century. Into one of the aftermath of the Russia-Ukraine war is the energy crisis. Now, the German economy will slide into recession. The federal economy minister is saying this. The GDP of Europe's largest economy is set to contract 0.4% in 2023. The minister's forecast comes as Germany tackles rising energy prices and also disruption in supply. Joining me now, Deutsche Welle correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. He has more on this. Hi, Chip. Can you tell us about the main cause for the government's recession forecast?
Well, the main reason is really the energy prices and gas prices in particular. they have risen about sevenfold compared to where they were last year. And that is, as you said, having an impact on industrial production to where they were last year. And that is, as you said, having an impact on industrial production, which is the key driver of the German economy. So we've heard from companies as big as BASF say that they will be, cutting production going forward, and also potentially cutting jobs because of the high energy prices. And so it has a direct impact on the German economy and the main driver of the economy, which is why there is this recession forecast, which is for 0.4% next year, a contraction of 0.4% in 2023, and of course a lower forecast for all of 2022 from the initial 2.2% growth that was forecast. They're only expecting a 1.4% growth, and we won't see anything change until about 2024. But of course, that all depends on how the energy situation and the crisis that we are currently going through develops.
Germany's economic challenges.
Well, Germany has major economic challenges, and of course, the economy minister didn't mince his words. He described this as an economic crisis and also a social crisis. There's a survey that is done every year by a major German insurer, which tracks the fears of Germans, and it shows that 2/3 of Germans are afraid of the current cost of living crisis that we are seeing. So obviously, for the consumer, there is a very direct impact. We're talking about food inflation of about 20% compared to where food prices were last year. And for some food items like cooking oil or eggs, it's as high as 30% compared to last year. And that's, of course, having a direct impact on people's wallets. And that's where, obviously, retail figures or retail or consumption could come from. So we won't see as much consumption as people cut down on their budgets and spending. And on the other hand, of course, industry is also affected, like I said earlier. So there's a lot happening, and of course, inflation is not going anywhere lower anytime soon. We're expecting an annual inflation rate of 8% for all of 2022 and 7% for next year, according to the German government. So there's not going to be much relief for neither businesses nor Germans going forward. So this is definitely a crisis, as it's been referred to.
And Germany has the GDP of Europe's, largest economy in this case. How will its economic slowdown affect the rest of Europe?
Well, given that Germany is Europe's industrial powerhouse, this will have a huge impact on supply chains in Europe. The fact that, of course, German producers are, at least some of them, are considering cutting production will mean that European producers elsewhere may have to look for other places to source their products and goods, like chemicals, for instance. So it will be an issue for European producers as well, leading to, of course, more supply chain issues. And apart from that, the fact that the German government is setting aside 300 billion euros to help businesses and consumers here cope with the high energy prices means that potentially the markets could be distorted. At least that's a criticism we're hearing from other parts of Europe. They say that it will lead to less of a competitive environment because, of course, German businesses will be getting a form of a subsidy from the government, making them, and of course, making it easier for them to compete against other European producers. And that is the main issue. So the price cap that is planned for the gas prices might be an issue for European producers elsewhere. And there's a lot of criticism coming in from other parts of Europe regarding that. So that's basically the two ways in which it could definitely impact Europe.
Chimponda Chimbella, Deutsche Welle correspondent, joining us from Berlin. Many thanks. Let's take you to the United Kingdom, where new British Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt has reversed nearly all of Prime Minister Liz Truss's mini-budget that had sparked market turmoil and reined in a vast energy subsidy plan, saying the country needed to rebuild investor confidence. Now, Mr Hunt appointed Friday to fix the public finances after Truss's economic plan hammered the value of British assets, said the country needed to generate confidence and stability before it could seek to grow the economy. Truss had planned for the basic rate of income tax to be cut 19% from 20% in April 2023, 1 year earlier than expected. Mr Hunt announced this will now stay at 20% indefinitely. Britain will now press ahead with its original plan, and this is to raise its 19% corporation tax rate, the lowest among the G7 club of rich nations, to 25% in 2023.
A central responsibility for any government is to do what's necessary for economic stability. This is vital for businesses making long-term investment decisions and for families concerned about their jobs, their mortgages and the cost of living. No government can control markets, but every government can give certainty about the sustainability of public finances. And that is one of the many factors that influence how markets behave. And for that reason, although the Prime Minister and I are both committed to cutting corporation tax, on Friday she listened to concerns about the mini-budget and confirmed we will not proceed with the cut to corporation tax announced. Firstly, we will reverse almost all the tax measures announced in the growth plan 3 weeks ago that have not started parliamentary legislation. So whilst we will continue with the abolition of the health and social care levy and stamp duty changes, we will no longer be proceeding with the cuts to dividend tax rates, the reversal of off-payroll working reforms introduced in 2017 and 2021, the new VAT-free shopping scheme for non-UK visitors, or the freeze on alcohol duty rates. At a time when markets are rightly demanding commitment to sustainable public finances, it is not right to borrow to fund this tax cut. So I've decided that the basic rate of income tax will remain at 20%, and it will do so indefinitely until economic circumstances allow for it to be cut.
Meanwhile, Londoners were split on Prime Minister Liz Truss's chances of staying in her job today, less than 2 months into her premiership. Ms Truss, who won the Conservative Party leadership just last month, is fighting for her political survival after a series of U-turns on key parts of her fiscal policy. Reports in British newspapers have suggested that she could be ousted by her own party as early as this week. Barrister Oliver John said the political turmoil wasn't a surprise, saying it's what happens when you allow leaders of governments to be elected by a small minority of the national population. But some students said Truss needed more time after a turbulent start to her premiership.
Not a great surprise, and what happens when you allow leaders of governments to be elected by a small minority of the national population. Let's hope they put it right soon.
Personally, no, I think that the United Kingdom's finances are in a bad way, and as with a lot of the European countries, and I don't think it'll make any difference. I think whoever's in charge is there to have a slow break rather than a crash break. You know, we're going to crash. They're trying to make it slowly so that they can manage it, you know.
Let's hope. I think we just need strong leadership, and for people to get behind that strong leadership instead of bringing it down every time. Which is the classic thing we do in the UK, unfortunately, build people up and then bring them down.
Well, for the markets, they've regained short-term confidence after Britain's new finance minister ditched most of Prime Minister Liz Truss's mini-budget. This according to a leading market analyst, but he warns that her premiership was politically undermined. The pound soared by as much as 1.4% to a session high of $1.1332 after the statement. Chief market analyst at CMC Markets told local reports that markets were much happier and had reacted positively to the reversals.
Well, markets are already reacting positively to the statement. The reversal of pretty much all of the tax measures, I think, was the signs of stability that markets were craving. An awful lot of it was starting to being priced in already. The pound's gone up. Gilt yields, they're sharply lower. 10-year gilt yields back below 4%, and pretty much in line now with where US 10-year Treasury yields are. So markets like what they're hearing. Whether or not this is good for the economy in the next 3 to 6 months, well, the jury's out on that. But for the here and now, it's good that Jeremy Hunt has signalled that he's pretty much on the same page as the central bank. No, I don't see how it can. I mean, it completely undermines her entire leadership platform. Jeremy Hunt has essentially taken up the mini-budget and basically ripped it to shreds, apart from 2 measures which were already in place. Now, the biggest concern that I have, even though that the financial stability situation has been stabilised, markets are much happier with the measures that have been announced, what happens next year? What replaces the energy price cap? We've had Goldman Sachs downgrade the UK's growth outlook for 2023 on the basis of the fact that the corporation tax rate is going up. Well, what's going to happen to consumer confidence in the absence of new price measures with respect to energy prices? The UK government is going to have to hope that gas prices continue to fall heading into 2023. Otherwise, the UK economy is going to look very, very difficult over the course of the next 12 to 18 months.
Meanwhile, on the back of the International Monetary Fund IMF meeting and the bad news for the global economy this past week, where it lowered the global growth rate to 2.7% for next year and warned of sovereign defaults on debts and forecast recession and gloom for markets. Chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers has been speaking on developing countries and how emerging markets in sub-Saharan Africa can pull through these times.
You know, we have so many opportunities in this country. I've been here for, well, I came the first time in 2008. I've lived here for a very long time. I, of course, japped from Lagos to now based in Abuja. But we have so many opportunities in so many different, every industry affected. And so, yes, it may create a little bit of additional pressure, but I don't think Nigeria or any emerging market should use this as an excuse. I mean, people that focus on developing their own human capital, their own infrastructure, their own export markets, they're going to do just fine, regardless of what happens in the rest of the world. I mean, if, for example, we exported something to the developed world, I mean, even a recession means that perhaps the economy shrinks 1 or 2%, but these are still tremendously large opportunities that can present opportunities for us. So I don't think it's any excuse. And I expect that in sub-Saharan Africa, as governance improves around the continent, as AFCFTA comes together, I think the sub-Saharan Africans do just fine. But the one difficulty I think we have to highlight that's a real issue for many countries around the world, but particularly for sub-Saharan Africa, of course, is climate change. So, I mean, we are in a climate emergency. The impact of climate change is not something that's going to happen a decade or two now. It's happening now. We see it with the flooding in Nigeria, the extensive flooding, the worst that we've seen, and certainly in most people's lifetimes. And I think that we just need to find ways to deal with the climate emergency, climate resiliency in the midst of building out our economy.
Now to politics, where Sweden's parliament confirmed moderate party leader Ulf Kristersson as prime minister today as head of three-party minority coalition with support from the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats. The moderate Christian Democrat and Liberal Party coalition plans to cut taxes, cap benefits, tighten immigration rules and give police more powers as part of a policy deal with the Sweden Democrats, which is now the biggest party on the right after September's election. Now, Now, until 2018, no party would have anything to do with Sweden Democrats, but their message that decades of over-generous immigration policies are behind. It also says a surge in shooting and gang crime has struck a chord with voters. Successive governments have toughened immigration rules over the last decade, but the new coalition will move even further to the right. A newly elected Iraqi president, Abdul Latif Rashid, has attended a handover ceremony at the Al Salam Palace in Baghdad. Iraqi's parliament elected Rashid as president on Thursday, October 13. He immediately named Mohammed Shia al-Sudani prime minister designate, ending a year of deadlock after a national election in October last year. The presidency, traditionally occupied by a Kurd, is a largely ceremonial position, but the vote for Rashid was a key step towards forming a new government, which politicians have failed to do since the election. Mr. Rashid, 78, was the Iraqi Minister of Water Resources from 2003 and to 2010. The British-educated engineer warned against former President Barham Salih, who was running for a second term. Early voting in the U.S. midterm elections begins today in the southern state of Georgia. The state drew the ire of former President Donald Trump after his surprise loss in Georgia, long a Republican stronghold in the 2020 presidential election. Poll workers there and in many states Trump lost in the election became the target of threats and harassment. Vanessa Montgomery, 58, a retired U.S. Army member and poll manager in Bartow County, a predominantly Republican district an hour northwest of Atlanta, was one of such worker, where after polls closed in Georgia's U.S. Senate runoff, January 2021, she and her daughter were leaving the precinct to take the ballot boxes to the election headquarters when they noticed an SUV following them. Well, that scary incident and others have prompted some election workers to weigh the decision on whether to return to work at the polls at all this time around.
So we haven't seen a lot of threats. You know, what happened with Vanessa, who you spoke with, was horrible. And that's been by far the worst that we've seen. But there has been a general sense of animosity from our voters that is really beating us down. And it's, we include in training, if you need to talk about that, you can talk to us. We are always happy to chat. I know my employees help each other and support each other. It's a family. But that really does hurt with recruitment, hurt with retention, and makes what used to be a very fun process for a lot of them not as much fun anymore. They still think it's important, and they're still here, and I appreciate that, but the tone has definitely changed.
At the end of the day, you know, when the polls is closed, we have to shut down everything. We have to shut down our BMDs, our scanners. We have to gather all our equipment and everything. So we was at the point where we had gotten everything. We had started putting the non-essential items in the car. And we had taped the door with the tape. And my daughter said, somebody's taking pictures. I said, well, maybe they're just taking a picture of the results, not so much as us. Didn't pay it any attention. So we grabbed the ballot box, the bag with the ballots in it, and all the rest of the stuff, and we get in the car. And so we're driving down. When you come out of the precinct, you have to take a right. So we took a right, went over the railroad tracks. When you get all the way up to the top, it's a stop sign. So when we got up to the stop sign, the SUV was right on our tail. Like, if she would have stayed there too long, they would have hit us. And so she said, Mom, I think they followed us. I said, well, okay, let's find out.
Let's go now to politics in Brazil, where leftist presidential candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said over the weekend that after the presidential debate with Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro, he will get many votes that will allow him win the second round of the presidential election. Lula and Bolsonaro took part in the first televised presidential debate Sunday night ahead of the runoff election, October 30. The debate was held in Sao Paulo and was organized by the Brazilian television network Television. During the event, Bolsonaro and Lula attacked each other's records in office, reflecting a fiercely polarized race that has been largely devoid of policy debate. The two candidates often fell back on personal attacks during the 2-hour-long televised debate. Mr. Lula won 48% of the vote in the first round of the election, October 2nd, against 43% for Mr. Bolsonaro, whose unexpectedly strong performance set the stage for a competitive runoff for October 30.
O ex-presidente Lula, infelizmente, não conseguiu responder perguntas importantes.
And to Asia, the Communist Party of China, CPC, will continue to exercise full and strict party self-governance and maintain fight against corruption with zero tolerance. Xiao Pei, deputy head of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection of the CPC Central Committee and vice chairman of the National Supervisory Commission of China, told a press conference on the sidelines of the ongoing 20th CPC National Congress that the party will resolutely punish corruption that occurs on the people's doorsteps, adding that the party is determined to win the anti-corruption combat and strive to offer guarantee for the building of a modern socialist country in all respects. Meanwhile, residents in Shanghai and Beijing today said they were confident China's commitment to President Xi Jinping's zero-COVID policy is the right strategy. Xi reiterated the validity of the policy and stressed its effectiveness at the 20th Communist Party's Congress, which kicked off, saying little else on the issue. China has repeatedly emphasized its commitment to Xi's zero-COVID strategy despite the widespread frustration and economic damage caused. The novel virus has brought persistent outbreaks across the country, which authorities have been battling with mass testing and lockdowns. Most places in China still require a negative COVID test within 48 or 72 hours for people to use public transport, enter schools, places of work, shops, banks, and even parks. Still staying with the East Asian country, the first train on a new rail sea transport route from Western China to Africa via Europe left the station in Jinbaijing district of Chengdu, capital of southwest China's Sichuan province, on Saturday, inaugurating a trade link that will dramatically cut current transport times. The train's cargo will travel overland to the port of Hamburg in Germany, where it will be loaded on a boat bound for the North African port of Casablanca in Morocco. The whole journey is expected to take 35 days, about 15 days quicker than previous routes that required transporting goods from Western China via Chinese seaports in the south or east of the country, and then on board cargo ships to Africa. And to Italy, where angry motorists yelled at climate activists during a sit-in blockade on a busy Rome motorway today. The demonstration against new gas drilling projects was staged by members of the climate movement Ultima Generazione, otherwise called Last Generation, who halted traffic on the Rohodo motorway in rush hour traffic. The blockade caused considerable disruption for commuters trying to get to work and caused angry reactions from motorists before police managed to clear the road by physically carrying the protesters off the highway. Ultima Generazione is part of the A22 network of climate civil disobedience groups active in several countries, such as Just Stop Oil in the UK, Stop Old Growth in Canada, Derniere Renovation in France, and Declare Emergency in the United States. Staying with climate change, thousands of Australians have returned to homes and businesses to assess flood damage, even as evacuation warnings remained in inland regions of southeast, with authorities warning of more rain ahead, which could trigger renewed flooding. In Melbourne's west, residents of the flooded suburb of Marybyong piled damaged furniture and soaked floor carpets outside homes, while in the regional centre of Shepparton, floored water peaked lower than expected, sparing homes from inundation. Large parts of Victoria State, southern New South Wales and the northern regions of the island state of Tasmania were slammed by an intense weather system last week, with some taking more than a month's worth of rain.
I do want to say that we are living in very dangerous times in the days and weeks ahead. What we have is a potential of further rain events here in Western New South Wales, further rain events in Victoria and in Tasmania, all of them combining and having an impact, because you essentially have a single drop of rain has nowhere else to go except stay on the surface.
We continue to see a significant number of rescues occurring. We've now seen over 650 flood rescues have to occur during this event. We've had another 100 or so overnight in and around the Shepparton Goulburn Valley district.
It's very devastating, very devastating. I think we don't realise how bad it's going to be until it actually subsides. I think a lot of the infrastructure and that's going to be damaged a fair bit. So looking at some of the roads and that prior to the floods, the roads weren't that good. I think after these floods it's just going to be even worse.
You're watching Channels Television, your home for the news. That's our programme this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Nwaka. Bye for now.